Good evening, everybody. This is Joe Califf, also known as Astro Joe, and we are here tonight because it is International Observe the Moon Night, special night tonight. Tonight is a night that we celebrate the one large natural satellite that the Earth has, our glorious moon. And as you can see here on the screen, if you can see it, we've got an image that I'm live streaming of the moon right now. So this is taken live through a Celestron Nexstar 8 SE telescope, and we're going to just spend the next hour or so going over several different features of the moon, taking a look at all of these different objects, seeing what there is to view. We'll talk about some of the space missions that are scheduled to go to the moon and things like that. So if you have any questions, go ahead and pop those into the chat feature there, and we'll get to those. But for the most part, I'm going to be quiet and let others take a look at what we're observing here. And again, we'll enjoy the beauty and splendor of the moon. So enjoy. Like I said, we're going to move around a little bit, take a look at different parts of the moon. I'll probably zoom out here and there and make sure that we get wide field views of the moon. Other times we'll get more zoomed in views, kind of like what we've got here. But we want to take a look at all of that. So here we're looking at the outer limb of the moon. This is the side that's kind of fully illuminated from the that's getting the sunlight right now. You can see the other parts are starting to come into focus here. Go ahead and move those out. And I apologize, I'm moving a little too fast here. Taking some time for the system to catch up with it. There we go. And like I said, I'm going to go through some of these features here. I'm playing around with the setup, making sure that everything is working okay. This is my first time actually using this particular setup here. I'm using my Celestron Nexstar 8 SE. It's an 8-inch telescope, what's known as a Schmidt-Cassegrain type telescope. But I'm also using a ZWO ASI 224 MC camera. So this is my first time doing this and not using my iPhone. So that's something that's new to me. So hopefully you guys will bear with me. Let me kind of work through the kinks here for this, and we'll get to it. What I'm going to do is you can see that the image of the moon is actually moving through the viewfinder here. You can see those three craters moving, and then you'll see others as well. We'll go ahead and get this steady so that it stops moving. Bear with me 1 second. It's going to move out, and then we'll move it back in. There we go. We've got this area here is right along the terminus or the terminator. And this is where, the shadow of the moon, where daylight meets day meets night essentially. And so if you were straddling that line right there, you would see either the sun rising or the sun setting, depending on where you're at. In this case, on this particular side, you would see the sun rising essentially, but it would take a lot longer than a sunrise here on Earth because of the rotation of the moon relative to the Earth itself. So just kind of curious, does everybody see that particular screen? If so, let me know. I'll make sure we get kind of a clear image here. I see Galveston County Mike. Hey, Galveston County Mike, how are you? Good evening to you as well. Thanks for joining. Glad you can make it with us here tonight. And like I said, we're going to go through and add a few different features to this and hopefully get this to where you can see everything here. I'm going to go ahead and play with the brightness just to bump that up a little bit, let you guys see a little more of what I'm seeing here. There we go. So I'm going to move this around just a bit. We're going to do, like I said, we'll move on a tour. My telescope's having a little bit of difficulty moving to one side right now, so I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but we'll get this straightened out here in just a sec. And again, you can see in this view here, moon kind of sliding through. So we're not doing accurate tracking. It's just kind of floating through the moon, the field of view here. And eventually we'll get this to kind of flow through as well. And if you're outside looking at the moon right now, you may ask yourself, hey, why does this look a little different than what I'm seeing? In the Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, it does kind of flip the image. It's just like if you're looking in a mirror yourself, the image is reversed, and the same thing is happening with the Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. Let's see, Galveston County, Mike, you're about 4 miles from Hawk Vineyard, facing southward. There's much less light pollution than near League City and Webster. Beautiful outside right now. It sure is. Now, I'm pretty much in the middle of Houston. I am about 2.5, 3 miles west of downtown, and it doesn't get much more light polluted than this. But that's the beauty of observing the moon. It's up there for a good portion of the month, and it contributes a lot to the light pollution that's out there. But it's pretty much impervious to any of the man-made light pollution that we have to deal with, here in the city and whatnot. So glad you've got some nice skies out there, Galveston County, Mike. Hopefully you'll be able to observe a few other things tonight and enjoy the beautiful weather that we're having here in Southeast Texas. Hey, Tango, how are you? Since beautiful celestial body has inspired poets for so long, thank you for sharing these images with us. Of course, yeah. No, this is for the entirety of humanity, right? We've always stared at the moon, and it has inspired many people across poetry, arts, and other endeavors as well. So it is certainly a beautiful thing to look at. And if you take a look at even at classical music, with Claire de Lune and other musical pieces like that, it's just been a huge inspiration for a lot of people artistically. So absolutely. So yeah, here you can see we're looking at kind of the northern limb. Whoops, excuse me. Right, and so we're taking a look here, kind of near the terminus where I was talking about earlier. You see just kind of that area here, and this is uh, that that location. I don't know if you can see my mouse, right? But this location here, right? This is Mare Nectaris. This is the Sea of Nectar. If you've ever heard of that before, this is one of the Mare. This is an area that was a lava basin. It filled with lava and kind of settled and then eventually sunk. In the old days, people called them Mare because they believed that they were seas. So Mare being the Latin word for seas. And so before we had telescopes and things like that, our ancestors would look up at the moon, those dark areas, like on Earth, they believed those were dark areas and seas and things like that. The interesting thing, though, is if you look at those mare compared to some of the surrounding area, these are much smoother, right? So you'll notice far fewer impact craters and things like that. So there's, generally speaking, a lot less surface features, cratering, pitting, things like that, relative to the other areas around there. So this again is areas where this had filled up with lava in the lava basin at some point, cooled, cracked, and then collapsed a little bit. And these areas generally, relatively speaking, for the moon are lower than some of the surrounding highlands, right? And so these other areas here, especially the lighter areas, are what are known as highlands. They tend to have higher elevation. You'll find mountains and things like that in these areas, as well as finding much more cratered surfaces and whatnot. So I was going to just move the telescope here down just a bit. Okay, so we were going to take a look at these three craters here. These are pretty interesting craters. I like these quite a bit, especially this one here. But these are three very prominent craters on the lunar surface. This one here is called Katharina. This one here is Cyrillus, and then the one here in the on the right. This is one of my favorites, just because you could see that ejecta mound that had settled here. This one's called Theophilus. So this is a really popular crater, surface features, and things like that on the moon that a lot of people like to observe when they're looking through their telescopes. So those are really nice. And then, over here to the left, you can start to see some of these mountainous features and things like that, right? So really good definition around these areas. And, obviously, as we get down here to the lower left, we've got some shadows and things like that. That's where the terminus is. But as we start to fade away from the terminus and move towards that center, you see there's a little bit more light. Not so much, right? We're approaching first quarter moon, which is why you see a nice amount of shadowing and things like that. And surprisingly, right, a lot of folks will say the best time to observe the moon is not when it's full, right? If we're looking at it with the naked eye, it's a pretty wondrous sight to behold. However, my favorite time to observe the moon is around first quarter. And the reason why is because we have light hitting at an indirect angle from where we're observing. It creates quite a few shadows. And that's why we're able to see a lot more of these surface features than we're able to see before. So, especially when there's a full moon, right? We just don't get these shadows. And our good friend Suzette says, beautiful. Absolutely. Hey, Suzette, how are you? Good to see you. Glad you're able to join us here tonight. And I'm going to go around to some other surface features here. I'm going to see if I can move down. And we're going to get to a pretty interesting feature that a lot of folks should recognize or be familiar with. Maybe not recognize, right? But certainly be familiar with. Okay. So we talked about Mare Nectaris earlier. And if we go down just a little bit from here, whoops, going in the wrong direction. We said, sorry, this is the first time I'm using this particular camera setup. And I see Becky Moorhead. Hey, Becky, how are you? Hello from Utah. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Glad you are able to join us. Hopefully Rob's joining us as well and is taking a look at some of this stuff. I know you guys are probably having slightly cooler weather than we are, but this is still a pretty nice day and evening here in Houston. But yeah, thanks for joining. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to join us tonight. So I'm on another surface feature here. And this is, remember when we were talking about Mare Nectaris, flat, relatively flat compared to the surrounding areas and whatnot, and then darker, right? These lowlands and whatnot. Does anybody happen to know what this surface feature may be? Probably, in terms of large surface features, the most famous lunar surface feature there is. I'll give everybody a minute or so to kind of think about it. Hey, there's our good friend Sarah Silva. Hey, Sarah, how are you? Sarah is a member of the Houston Astronomical Society, recently moved out to Florida, but she will always have a home here in Houston with the HAS. So glad you're able to join us tonight. Hopefully you and everybody else who is dealing with the hurricane there in Florida are doing well and drying up. So glad you can join us. But again, this is, and then I apologize for the background noise. We've got some vehicles kind of moving through here. But this is Mare Tranquillitatum. So this is the Sea of Tranquility. And of course, this is where the first men to land on the moon actually landed, right? So in here, I'm going to see if we can zoom into the craters that were named after the three astronauts who were part of the Apollo 11 mission. So bear with me here as I get in here. And I hope I don't lose it here, but like I said, bear with me. This is still a new system and it's a little jumpy right now. It doesn't quite respond the way that I was hoping it would. Hey, Becky, I see that Rob is there with you. All right. I'm glad he's able to join us. So tell him I said hello, please. All right. So this is not quite cooperating. I'm going to give it just another second to try to catch up before I lose the entire moon here. So bear with me. Sorry about that. I'm going to switch over to another screen here so I could zoom out just a little bit. Yeah, for some reason this telescope doesn't want to quite move, so I'm going to go ahead and reset the controller here. Bear with me one moment while I do that, and hopefully it'll become a little more responsive here in just a sec. In the meanwhile, like I said, I'm hoping most of you all are having decent weather, are able to get out there with or without a telescope and just take a look at the moon tonight. It is absolutely gorgeous here in Houston and Southeast Texas. So I'm hoping that the rest of you are having really nice weather and are able to see that as well. All right, so we're back here. We're going to give this just a second so that it can reconnect. Okay, we're going to go down just a little bit further, take a look at a few other things here. Like I said, I'm hoping that this starts behaving a little better. Like I said, it's a little bit of challenge so far. Okay, and there is another feature here. Let me see if I can get this in focus a little better. You see a lot of movement there, and that's because of me focusing. But that's Mari fecunditatis. This is another Mari feature. And over here on the kind of the upper left area, you'll see a cluster of craters, which are really interesting. I think they're pretty interesting. One of them kind of looks like a cat's paw or something similar to that. You'll see three craters there, and then they're surrounded by two larger craters. The larger crater on the top is known as Colombo, and you have the smaller craters in the middle that I've always thought were interesting, especially when you start to get into those two that are really close together. If you're using high power, I'm going to see if we can do this with the telescope here tonight, or at least the software. It might not let us get there, just given the sky conditions and maybe the focus, but we'll give it a shot. So over on the left hand side, yeah, that area there, they share I say they share, right? The crater walls for the two are very close to one another. And again, when you're looking at this through a telescope at a time like this, when you've got a first quarter moon, really interesting when you crank up the power if the seeing lets you do that. But really nice to be able to see some of the detail that's in especially this larger one, Magellanes, in this particular crater here. You can notice it is a little bit darker on the inside here, the interior of that crater, than the upper crater is here. So being able to see the two of those in the same eyepiece and then doing some contrasting views so you could see what the interior of this looks like versus that one. And I don't have the details of this, myself right now, but typically those lunar features, the regolith, what we would call dirt, but it's certainly not dirt the way that we know dirt to be on Earth. But that lunar regolith, typically whenever you have an impact, a meteor strike or something like that, an asteroid strike, it hits the lunar surface, blows out all of that regolith, and then you would typically have rays and white areas. And you can kind of see that here over on the right-hand side. There's a larger crater that you can actually make out some of those rays. So that particular crater here, if you take a look, you can see kind of that ejecta mound that kind of where it landed here, created that mound. And you've got these things known as rays. So you can see them kind of emanating out from the central part of the ray, from the crater itself. So these are really interesting. And we'll actually take a look at a few other craters that are like that. But even on the upper left-hand side, you can see another area where you've had some craters here, and you've got that ejecta pattern here and those white areas there. So pretty interesting patterns there. And I am going to see if my telescope is cooperating, so hopefully it is here. Bear with me one moment. It keeps wanting to go the opposite way, so that's what I've got to get used to. I'm not sure exactly why it's doing that, but we'll try to accommodate for it. All right. And then here we're getting to another mare, right? This is one of the first mare that you will see after a new moon. So this is obviously on that eastern limb, or in this case, the western limb, right? But you can see the mare there, and let me see if I can get it back recentered. Bear with me. And again, you can kind of see the surface features, darker than the surrounding area. These are actually lower when you do a topographical survey of the surrounding area. Not much in terms of surface features. You can see a couple of craters in there, but nothing compared to what is around the immediate area there. But this is known as Mare Crisium. So this is the Sea of Crises, right? This is an area that when you're looking, like I said, at the moon, shortly after new moon and whatnot, this is one of the first mare that you would actually see. And then I'm going to see if I can zoom into this here. This crater I've always kind of liked, and if you're a Star Trek fan, I don't think it's named after him, right? But this crater here, I'll see if I can zoom into it. But that crater is known as Picard, right there in the center left of the screen. I'll see if I can move it back. So there in the center of the screen, that's a crater known as Picard. Really interesting features when you're looking at it again in high power. I don't have the right focus for it right now. I'll see if I can adjust it. But the crater walls there are really interesting because they're quite staggered, and you can make out a few different layers within the crater itself. So I've always thought that one was really interesting. And then if we scroll down, you'll come to this other crater, and I don't know if you all can see my mouse or not, but this crater here is known as Pierce, one of the other prominent craters within this particular mare. And then there's a dark crater, and I'll see if I can move it right there in the center. Right, small crater, but fairly deep crater, right? One that you get quite a bit of shadow within the crater wall itself, and that is known as Greaves. I almost said that was Pierce. The Pierce was the other one we were looking at, but that's Greaves. And again, if you're looking at it through a telescope with really good contrast, good seeing, and things like that, you'll actually be able to see quite a bit of detail. That shadow extends for quite some time. So, it is a deeper crater relative to its size. So it must have been an impact that hit very head on, created a fairly deep crater, must have had, quite a bit of kinetic energy as it hit the moon in that particular spot and left that pretty large crater in that space. So I'm going to go ahead and move down just a little bit. And there is another crater there, kind of in the highlands, right to the left of Mare Crisium. You can see it, and it's going up, and I need to get it to stop here. But this is a good example of what we were talking about earlier, right? So you see in those highland areas, you've got this crater, not the large one down at the bottom, but the one at the upper center. That one is a Proclus crater, and you can see some definite ejecta marks from the left, from the bottom heading out to about the 7 o'clock position, like I said, over here on the right, excuse me, to the about 3:30 position, about the 2 o'clock position. And you also have some ejecta going to the about the 11 o'clock position as well. So that's a really interesting crater. Just because it looks, because of those ejecta lines, it almost looks pyramidal to me, right? Every time I look at this, especially this ejecta line to the lower left-hand portion, the one that kind of extends out to the 7 o'clock position, almost gives it some three-dimensional depth. Really kind of contrasts versus the two mare that surround this. So you can see quite a bit of features here. You can see the lower part of that crater there has a pretty bright wall, right? And then on the other side, obviously, we've got the shadows there. So that plays a pretty interesting game between the light and shadow itself. And then if we move over, this is in an area, this bright area called Pallasomni. If we move over, and I'm going to see if I can get this to move down just a little bit. This crater here is a large crater, and it's called Lyell, and it's really interesting. Again, when you're looking at it through the telescope, we just don't have kind of the focus or contrast right now. I have to see if I can somehow correct that. Maybe that's something I can do with the image processing here. Let me see if I can get some stacks. Okay, I don't think it likes those stacks. So we'll go ahead and restart this here. Oh, it didn't like what I just did there, so bear with me. I am going to revert here. Oops. Give me a sec. Let me go ahead and stop this and restart it. And we'll give it a go again. So sorry about that. I figured we might be able to stack some of these images to get a little bit more clarity, but that's just not happening. So, all right, so we're back. There we go. Let me go ahead and make this larger, and I will share the screen. And we should be back online. So hopefully everybody's seeing that. But you can see down here at the lower part of the view, we've got that crater that we were just looking at, and we'll actually start working our way over to the left here. But let me go ahead and zoom in here so that we've got a better view. And I'm going to go ahead and just adjust the telescope a little bit here. Oops. Okay, so we're back in that Pallasomni area. And this other feature, you can see below that crater we were looking at that almost looks three-dimensional. You have this Macrobius crater as well. So that's the large crater kind of there in the upper portion of the view. And then to the left of it, you have two smaller craters, really nice dark features that you can see in those as well. And then a number of features here. So I'm going to go ahead and move over to the left. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so we've got better view. Okay, and then it's getting there. Over here at about the 8 o'clock position, you'll see a larger crater and a smaller one. Again, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Hopefully, it's showing that, but let's see if I can zoom in here for you. Try to get it centered. Oops. It's not wanting to cooperate, so bear with me 1 second. But the interesting thing, near the center left here, you see these mountains. This is an area known as Mons Argeus. So again, another mountain feature. You can see the pretty pretty plain, barren areas of the Mare next to it. It's also known as Dore Lister, but this is kind of that northern edge of the Sea of Serenity. But nice mountain range in this area as well. So that's known as Mons Argeus, the mountains of Argeus, which are named after a peak in Asia Minor. So that's a nice, interesting feature. Again, kind of between those two mare. So it's a nice kind of contrast between those different areas there. Over to the left, we can see the larger crater. That's a crater known as Dawes, and that's named after a British astronomer named William Rudder Dawes, who was born in 1799 and died in 1868. So that crater forever bears his name. And then again, we're going to move over to the left here. And towards the bottom, I mean, you can see a nice crater just along the Mare wall. It's a really deep crater. There's a lot of shadow. This is kind of in the 7:30, 8 o'clock position. That one is known as Menelaus, and it's a really, again, another one of those craters that if you've got a telescope, you've got an eyepiece in there, you get good seeing. Really is a wonderful contrast against some of what you see in the eyepiece itself. So we're going to continue moving to the left. And this is where we start to get into the terminus over here. So we want to be really careful. And you'll notice this crater, it almost looks like a U shape here. It's moving towards the middle here. That crater is actually named after Julius Caesar. So that is the crater Julius Caesar itself. But the interesting feature there is that you'll notice that the northern part here, at least in this particular view, that part of the crater wall seems to have been destroyed through a number of different processes, maybe a lava flow, something else like that. But certainly the southern portion, the eastern and western portion of those is pretty well preserved. And then you'll also, to the right of that, notice that you've got a nice Rime feature. So in this area, you've got, again, the craters here, but these straight-walled features, Rime, which are, again, areas where you've got, I guess the closest equivalent you'll probably have to that on Earth are caverns and whatnot. But, certainly not created by the movement of water and things like that, like we have here on Earth. But certainly these features are interesting to look at through the telescope itself. And then moving further up, we've got a few other features next to Julius Caesar. We have Agrippa and Temple, these two near the terminus, I would say probably in the 7 o'clock position over here. Again, kind of overlapping craters, really nice. And again, because we're looking at this at a time when the shadows are really long because of where the sun is relative to the moon. And from our perspective, you see some really, really nice features, really long shadows and things like that. So I'm going to see if I can get maybe a little bit better focus on this. And I apologize for the movement. Yeah, I think that's probably about as good as I'm going to get right now, unfortunately. Okay. And then let's see if we can see if we can find Rima Hyginus. I think it might be lost in the shadows here, unfortunately, so I don't think we're going to be able to see that tonight. But yeah, we'll just leave it here for a moment, let people kind of take that in and see this particular area. Like I said, this is somewhere kind of in the area of the Sea of Serenity and the Sea of Tranquility. You could see both of those to the upper right, that's the Sea of Tranquility. To the lower left, that's the Sea of Serenity. And to the east, right, so to the right, left part of this image, if we had enough light, you would start to see Mare Imbrium. So this is the Sea of Imbrium. So this is, again, another nice area, maybe in a day or two, as the sun starts to illuminate more of the face of the moon that we can see. You'll start to see some really nice features there, some really nice mare in this area as well. And the other thing that I like is, again, we probably need another day or two, but in this area to the left where we're looking at, you have Montes Apenninus, so one of the more popular, more famous mountain ranges on the moon itself. So I'm going to go ahead and like I said, just leave this here for a bit, let people kind of enjoy this view, and then we'll go ahead and start moving around a little bit more. If you have a feature that you want me to see if we can track down, let me know, and I'll go ahead and get the telescope over there if it does cooperate, and we'll see if we can go ahead and see those. And I'm also going to play with this to see if we can possibly get a wider field view again with this camera. It's my first time playing around with it, so I'm not sure if it's going to allow us to zoom out a little bit, but we'll give that a shot here. Again, really nice area next to the terminus. I'm going to see if I can bump up the brightness just a little bit. And we've got a really short exposure time. With the moon, you don't need a lot of exposure just because it's so bright. Just a little bit is all it takes to get a good image. But I'm going to see if I can bump this up just a tad, a little more brightness. I don't want to lose too much of the contrast. And there we go. And I'm going to go back up to those three craters we kind of started off with Katharina, Cyrillus, and Theophilus, and see if we can look at a few more of the surface features in that area. I'll bump this down just a tad. Bear with me here. And again, these three are the craters that we started off with. So again, Theophilus, Cyrillus, and Katharina from right to left. And in the upper right-hand corner, again, you can see some of these features, almost like cliffs and things like that I'd mentioned to the left. Those are really interesting features. So this is Rupus Altai. So again, some really nice straight-walled features and things like that if you wanted to bump up the magnification in a telescope, you'd really be able to see some nice detail in this area. So, just kind of goes to show a lot of people will look at the moon and it's just kind of hanging out there in the sky. For a lot of astronomers, it is the bane of their existence, especially for astrophotographers, right? We want as dark a sky as we can possibly get. The moon certainly doesn't contribute to that when it's up and bright. So, but in those times when it is up, there's just a lot to look at. So I highly encourage anybody who's got a telescope or even a pair of binoculars, just take those out and point those towards the moon. Really nice, beautiful features that you can take a look at. Like I said, there's so many different features, so many different craters, all of them unique and really interesting to look at. So highly recommend you all taking the time to do that. And then in the upper portion of here, about the 11:30, 12 o'clock position, you'll notice there's another large crater that's got, again, that little mound, that mountain in the middle there. This Piccolomini. So this is a really interesting crater itself, named after the Italian astronomer Alessandro Piccolomini. He lived in the 1500s, and that crater bears his name. But again, to the kind of the south of there, you see clusters of craters that looks like they've been wiped out one after the other. Looks like, one got hit, then there was another one that was almost on top of that, and then another one almost on top of that. And the one that's closest to Piccolomini here, that's the one that seems to be the newest of those, and has certainly overtaken a lot of the features of the older ones that are south of that. And again, you can kind of see this feature to the lower right-hand corner of Piccolomini. It almost looks like you've got a circular pattern of craters. So I don't know who else can kind of see that, right? But it almost looks like, to me, when I look at this, it reminds me of some sort of charms bracelet or something like that, where you've got all of these different craters in a circle, each representing different charms and whatnot. So really, really interesting. And then Becky, I see you said, what are the lower left that are in a row? And I'm hoping it's in the same view that we're looking at. Is that where you're looking? If you wouldn't mind just chiming in there and letting me know if I've moved past it or if it's still in the field of view there. We'll see if we can get to those. And here in the field of view, though, we've got Piccolomini, which is the kind of the prominent crater there in the north central region. To the left, you've got two darker craters. Those are really nice because, again, you can kind of see that pretty distinct shadow in those craters themselves. And let's see if I can find those. One of those is, where is it? Okay, so the one on the northern part is known as Wohler, and that one is named after Frederick Roller, who was a German chemist. And then the one to the south that almost looks like a snowman, you've got the crater with a smaller crater on the top of it. That's known as Rothman. So Christopher Rothman, again, named after another German, this time an astronomer, not a chemist, though. And then as we start to move to the left, again, you see another cluster of craters and lots of smaller craters around there. To this one, again, I don't know if you see my mouse, right? But there appears to be almost like a V-shaped pattern. If you're familiar with the night sky, this reminds me of the head of Taurus the bull. But then you have some larger craters around that. And to the northern, the uppermost one is known as Riccius. So that is named for Augustine Riccius, an Italian astronomer. A lot of these craters were named after Italian and European astronomers and whatnot who lived in the 1600s. But the interesting thing is the one in the middle here is named after a rabbi, Levi Crater. So named after Rabbi Levi Ben Gershon, who was a French philosopher and mathematician. He lived a little bit further back than some of these other folks. He lived in the 1200s and 1300s, died in 1344. But he was again, a French philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer. And then in the lower area, it's really here at the kind of the lower part of the screen, you've got a crater, the larger crater known as Zagat, and named after Abraham Ben Samuel Zagat, who was a Spanish astronomer as well. And then right to I'd say the 2 o'clock position from there, you have another crater named Lindenau crater, which is named after another German astronomer. So you can see that Germans and French and Spaniards are pretty well represented in this area as well. So I'll go back and see if Becky had almost off the screen, lower left, 4 in a row. Let's see if we can find those. Lower left. Bear with me here, Becky. Let's see if we can get there. Oh, I didn't want to go that far up. So I'm hoping these are the ones you're referring to, Becky. Let me stop this. Hopefully it'll stop right there. So are these the four craters? Certainly there's a large one here in the middle that's kind of dominating this entire area. So Becky had said it's almost off the screen, screen lower left, four in a row. I'm guessing these are the ones you're referring to, but not sure. But the larger one here is one known as Moralisius, so named after Francisco Moralisio, who was an Italian mathematician. The one that kind of shares a crater wall here, and it's interesting because that ejecta mound is not quite in the center. It's over to the right. It's actually not an ejecta mound. It looks like an ejecta mound, but there's actually another crater here, but a significant amount of shadow that you see there. But that larger crater with the smaller crater kind of in the middle of it is Barocius crater. So that one is up there. And then eventually you move up, you've got Clariot, which is the one on the left, the far left. And as you move up, you've got this other large one here. It's known as Baco. So I'm hoping those were the ones you were referring to. I appreciate the sentiment, Becky. Thank you very much. But yeah, this is, again, really interesting area because you'll notice that there's quite a bit of crater activity markings on the surface. And as we're moving here, I don't know if you can notice it, but over on the left-hand side, right, if you're looking at the limb of the moon, what we can see is quite a bit of surface features that you'll notice, and especially in this area, in the lower left-hand position, these mountain ranges there certainly do look like they tower over everything else that's in this area. So really, really interesting mountain features. Some of those might be crater walls as well, but these certainly look to be really, really high areas compared to some of the other surrounding areas there. I'm going to go ahead and move this down a little bit, and we'll start looking at some of those features closer to the terminus. And again, if you're looking at the moon, this is a really, my favorite place to look is near the terminus. Again, because of the long shadows, you're going to get some really nice contrast. Some of these features, especially the Rimae, that you won't necessarily see when you've got a full moon and whatnot, they certainly pop. Really, really nice things to look at there. Hey, it's Will. Will, how's it going? Good buddy Will Young, who might be on his way home from the Okie-Tex Star Party, might still be out at the Okie-Tex Star Party. Not sure where he's at right now, but wherever you're at, Will, hopefully you're having a good time. If you guys are still out there in Oklahoma observing, hoping the skies are cooperating, you're getting some good, clear, transparent skies, and really enjoying the time. So, Will, if you're not familiar with him, you probably are. He's known as Deep Sky Dude. So give him a follow on YouTube, on Facebook, on all the social media platforms at Deep Sky Dude. You can find him. He's got a lot of great videos. He's out there all the time doing some really interesting things with astronomy. So highly recommend you give him a follow if you're not already, and check out the stuff that he's putting together. But Will is a good buddy of mine. We'll probably be out at the El Dorado Star Party next month. Out on the Lodge Field, and if things go well, if the internet's working out there, we might do a live stream from out there as well. So that'll be an interesting thing to do. And Will said they're on the way home, stop near Dallas. All right. Well, glad to hear you guys are on the way home, and hopefully you guys have some safe travels and everything goes well for you guys. So, and like I said, hope everything was really fun over at the Okie-Tex Star Party. It looks like it was a good time. Y'all had a few good nights, and certainly can't beat the darkness of the skies out there. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left in this live stream, but we'll probably do something in a couple more days if the weather still holds. I wouldn't mind coming back out here, setting up the telescope, and maybe if Will is back in town at that point, we can get him on the live stream and really take a look at some of these features. Because tonight is International Observe the Moon Night. The focus for tonight is the moon, but it's a great time to observe other objects in the night sky as well. This is planet season, so we've got Saturn is pretty high and prominent in the night sky. Saturn was just at opposition about a month and a half ago, so it's still really close, really interesting to look at through a telescope. And we'll probably try to see if we can get that in the telescope in a couple of days. And then Jupiter was just recently at opposition, so this is the closest Jupiter has been in about 60 something 70 years. I can't remember exactly when it was. I believe 1953 was the last time it was this close. But if you've got a telescope, even if you've got binoculars, certainly go outside, take a look at Jupiter. You're going to see some really interesting things. You'll be able to make out some of the belts and the bands and the moons and the great spots and all of those different things. So should be really good. So seeing looks really good here. Yeah, it's not bad actually. For being in Houston, to be honest with you, Will, it's I could probably do better with the focus, but it is what it is. And yeah, I miss you guys too. I wish I was at Okie-Tex as well, but we've had some good weather, and fortunately been able to take the telescope out a few nights here in Houston. Over at Memorial Park, had some events out there so that we could bring other Houston Astronomical Society members out and let them take a look through the telescopes as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move down into some of these other areas near the terminus. I just want people to, again, take a look, see what's down in this area. Like I said, when you're looking at the moon at this time, following that terminus is always really interesting. And you just see so many features, right? Everything is super exaggerated. The craters look much larger than they actually well, not that they actually are, but you obviously are able to make out more of those features. The mountainous areas cast much larger shadows and whatnot. So it's a really, really great time to be observing the moon. If you haven't taken your telescope out, if you don't have a telescope, look for your local astronomy club, and hopefully they've got some public outreach events that you can join. Getting a little bit of noise here, so I'm going to see if I can cut down on the noise. I say noise. This is the digital noise. Sorry, not the noise in the background. Somebody was starting their car. But again, we'll take a look here. And I think a lot of it is really just because of the contrast. And I'm going to see if I can find out what these features are before we wrap up tonight. Looks like this is near the Cassini crater. And down south of this is Valles Alpes. So in the next day or two, you're going to see some really interesting features in this area. Probably in the next day or so, maybe 2 days, there's a really interesting feature known as the lunar X. So right at around first quarter moon, near the terminus, you'll see just a play of light and shadow where it looks like there's a large X on the surface of the moon. So hopefully we'll be able to see that, and maybe we can broadcast that to everybody else as well. So again, you can kind of see the Theophilus here, Cyrillus in the middle. One of the interesting things about Cyrillus, I know we've looked at it a number of times, but again, if you had a telescope with decent viewing, decent contrast, there's another crater there to the left part of that. So you've got the three craters in the top part of this image. The one in the middle has a number of features inside the crater itself. So to the left, you see there's a nice crater within there. And then over to the right, you've got those ejecta mounds that were formed after the impact of the crater, excuse me, the object that hit this lunar surface in this area and created this crater itself. And lastly, before we wrap up tonight, I'm just going to go down a little further south and see if we can find some interesting features here. And just let everybody enjoy the moon here tonight on International Observe the Moon Night. And again, you can see that crater, that U-shaped crater there towards the bottom, known as Julius Caesar. Moving across the Mare here. The Sea of Serenity. down here below. And then I'm going to see, like I said, before we leave, I'm going to see if I can find the Apollo 11 landing spot, and hopefully we can just kind of get a view of that. Actually, we're going to go up just a little bit into the Sea of Tranquility, over to Lamont. Whoops, a little too far, sorry. We'll get back there. This feature over in the upper central area, you can kind of see these highlands that are jutting out into the mare there. That's sinus aspiratitis there in between. And then over to the left, you'll actually see this area known as Rime Hypatia, which is, again, another very famous, very popular lunar feature that many astronomers like to observe. Um, Down below, like I said, those two craters that are in the mare here, north and south, that's Ritter and Sabine. And let's see if we can find Apollo 11, the Apollo 11 landing site before we call it a night. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, so again, I don't know if you can kind of see my mouse here, but we talked about this feature here. The crater Hypatia and then the sinus aspiratitis. And you had Ritter and Sabine over here on these two craters, kind of north south to the right here. And if you go to the about 1 o'clock position from here, you'll actually, this area in the lower central part of the screen here is actually where the Apollo 11 mission landed on the lunar surface in the Sea of Tranquility back in 1969. So we're actually taking a look at it here. I wish I had some features. I'll have to, get something for the next time we do something like this, to where, I'm able to highlight these areas. Again, I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse or not. Yeah, Will said there's the lunar Texas. Indeed, you can kind of see it there. Moltke's close to the landing site, and it indeed is. And I'm looking for it here. I can't, unfortunately, point it out. I'm not sure if the mouse is showing up here so that I can kind of show everybody where this is, but it is in the lower portion of the screen where the Apollo 11 landing site is, and that's again a really interesting thing. It's pretty much featureless, but when they were headed to the moon the first time, they wanted to get to an area that they knew didn't have boulders strewn about, was going to be a fairly safe area to land. Well, they were hoping it would be a safe area to land. They weren't quite sure if the lunar regolith would actually support the weight of the spacecraft, whether or not it would sink when it actually landed. But that area down there at the bottom part of the screen is near where the Apollo 11 craft landed, the Eagle lunar landing module, and that's where history was made. So again, want to really thank everybody for joining us here tonight. Like I said, I appreciate you all jumping on with me, spending some time looking at the moon. It is International Observe the Moon Night. If you got some time, like I said, if you got a telescope, or even if you don't, just head outside, take a look at our moon, enjoy it for a little bit. And then you'll also notice a couple of bright things to the left if you're looking, towards the south. To the left of the moon, and it's actually, as you start to move towards the east, technically, you'll see Saturn really high in the sky at this point, and then Jupiter started rising, several hours back. So it's probably going to be the second brightest thing that you see in the night sky after the moon tonight. and take a look at those as well. So for everybody, like I said, thank you very much for jumping on. Will, all hail the moon, indeed. Appreciate you all jumping on, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. And Will, if you're up for it, maybe we can do another live stream this week as well. So you all take care, be safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.